Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Without further ado, I'm going to welcome Zach Mangum to our stage. Let's give it up. Oh, yeah!
That feels great.
So you might think the mic is unnecessary, but it helps with our camera, and it makes it look more legit.
Got it.
As if you needed help. So, Zach, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, and specifically like where you came from, you know, growing up, any experiences that helped shape your entrepreneurial mind frame, and let's just get started from there.
Okay. You want the long version?
I want what's important and what you might think that is helpful for others who, you know, want to follow in your entrepreneurial footsteps.
Okay. So I grew up in Orem, at the mouth of Provo Canyon. I spent my entire life there. Played soccer. In fact, Eli here was one of my teammates growing up playing soccer.
Sweet.
That was kind of my religion. Soccer was first, second, and third priority for me. I grew up, my dad's a plumber.
Okay.
And I think if there's anything that like shaped me in terms of like work ethic and things like that I think have been helpful in my professional career, it's soccer and it's my dad. So soccer, I played on competitive enough teams that we had to work really hard, and played on some pretty interesting teams with some pretty talented kids, and it becomes like pretty all-consuming. And if you want to be good enough to actually go somewhere with it, which I did, it requires a lot of effort, and I care deeply about that, more than I should probably admit. So I won't get into a ton of detail, but I also, my dad, his thing was when you turn 14, my brothers would probably tell you younger because they're older than me, and life's always for the older brother, right? So they when I was 14 at least, I had to work for my dad every summer. And he wasn't like your fixer-upper plumber. He was the guy that worked on like kind of bigger homes, usually in the foothills in like Linden and northeast Orem. And that means that, I don't know if you know what the typical process is in building a home, but after you dig the hole, you pour the foundation, and before you pour the floor, the concrete floor, you have to dig like this network of trenches where the drainage pipes are going to go. And basically that was like the manual labor that his sons would do. Okay. And so we would go out there, and of course you're in the foothills, that's like an important detail. You always would be digging this trench that needed to be like this wide, enough for a pipe to fit through, and it needed to slope, so it needed to be really deep, and I shouldn't say really deep, it needed to be relatively deep in some parts and gradually get more shallow. And without fail, you would be like that close in a trench that needed to be that deep, and you would hit the top of a rock that was like the size of, this big, and you had to take that thing out, or you had to chip away at it with a jackhammer. And there were definitely times where like I didn't love my dad for a few years, because we spent, woke up at 7, we'd start working at like 7:30 or 8, we weren't done until 4 or 5, and then I would go to soccer practice, and then I'd come home, and these are like summers where your buddies are like swimming and chasing girls around or whatever and having fun, and I'm like, I'm already exhausted when it's time to go to soccer, and then I get done with soccer and I'm like, I just want to go take a nap, So but those were things that taught me for sure like this work ethic where I feel like supremely confident that I can't be outworked, And with a startup, I think that, that's something I try and teach my little boys. I've got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old little boy, and that's like something I drive into their head. Like any like shortcomings you have intellectually can be overcome if you just plow through harder and stick with the problem longer.
So that lesson of physical labor, does that translate well to when doing a startup? Because sometimes I find at least that when I build something or I dig a hole, at the end of the day I have a hole, or I've got a wall that's been put up. But when I'm working on my own startup, at the end of the day, a customer still thinks it sucks. You know, so how do you find the translation?
Honestly, to me, I think it translates perfectly because, like, no matter what, it always sucks.
Yeah.
Whatever you build, it's never good enough, right? It'll be sometimes like at least to me, there are times where it's good enough for the user, but it's never going to be good enough for you. It's always going to have to be way better for somebody.
That's fair.
And so to me, I think it translates well because you kind of have to just keep plowing, you know? And I mean, you got to find a way to achieve some sort of balance in the process, but I think a ton of people, I think a ton of startups fail because people just kind of, they give up. It gets too hard, it gets too exhausting. I consider myself like, I'm definitely not genius level or close in, like, I'm not even close, right? But things I think worked out because we outworked anybody.
So where do you find the balance? Or how?
It's like a work in progress, man.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm not good at it. I have, if there's one thing that I regret a lot with GroSocial in particular, it's that balance was not as high a priority as it should have been. You know, it drains on you. I got to the point where I gained like over 30 pounds. I was over 30 pounds heavier than I am now, like 1 year into GroSocial. And like I would go and I'd work, I'd come home, I'd eat dinner, I'd help my wife put the kids to bed, and then we would like watch a show on TV, you know, like watch the Tonight Show or something like that. My wife would be ready to go to bed, and once she goes to bed, I would pull up my laptop, and like in all fairness, I probably have my laptop open as we were watching the show or the movie working. And then I would just work until my body said you can't be awake any longer. So sometimes that was like 1 or 2 in the morning, sometimes it was like 4 in the morning. Yeah. And then I'd wake up at, you know, as early as my body would let me wake up and just keep doing that. Yeah. And no sleep and no exercise and lack of like caring at all about your diet. It's a pretty bad recipe. Yeah. And so, you know, what I did that I think helped a ton is I forced myself to exercise every day and to get, like enough sleep's a relative thing for people, right? But enough for me is like 6.5 to 7 hours type of thing, and eat a little bit better. And then when you come home, I made this like commitment, like home is home, so stay home. Yeah. And don't dig into your phone, don't pull up your laptop, just be home, right? And I think that creates enough like really important battery recharging for you. Yeah. That like you kind of need that, you know. So I think without that, like you're more likely to hit that point of like burnout. And when things go crappy, which they always do, it's a little bit easier to get like far more like fatally discouraged by it, I think. Yeah. So I think balance is, it's essential. So
did you at all have any influence from your education? I mean, you did soccer. What did you study when you went to school?
So I went to BYU and I studied finance.
Helpful or not?
Yeah, totally, actually. I studied finance. I did, so my older brother, I have 2 older brothers. My oldest brother went to Harvard to get his MBA, so like he set the bar this high for all of us. And I'm just not smart enough to do that. My next oldest brother went to BYU, got his master's in accounting. He did like the Big 4 accounting thing. Has had a really great career as well. And so these 2 guys, like, you know, I mean, I'm like the younger brother, so I think they're cool and by default, but like, I also look up to them in that like these guys are, their intellectual horsepower is like on a different level for sure than where mine is. And so I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, all right, that would be rad to go to Harvard one day, but I need to, you know, let's start where we're going to start. So I thought I'll do accounting because my brother's got this great career and everything else. Then I find out that like an accountant gets his master's and makes like 40 grand working for a Big 4 accounting firm. He might get like a decent raise, and then it usually ends up kind of rosy in terms of like a financial outcome for him if they stick with it long enough. But the more and more I thought about like being an accountant and what that was like, I just realized that wasn't the right thing for me. So I decided to shift into finance because I did like numbers, right? And I love the business side of, I just love business, right? And so I started doing that. BYU was like really heavily pushing, you go do investment banking or you go do consulting. And I was a missionary in New York City.
Okay.
So I thought, how cool, I'll go back to New York City, I'll go do the Wall Street thing, and then that's like a great tee up for going to Harvard. You know,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like I'm gonna outdo my brothers, right? So anyway, interviewed at these banks, and I decided, you know what, maybe what I'll do is instead I'll go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
I took the LSAT. I could tell you a really sad, like tragic story about that if you want me to, but that didn't work out. Thank heavens it didn't. So I ended up interviewing. I had an opportunity to go to Wall Street. I decided not to because
Can you tell us about that decision? Because that sounded like the perfect job.
doing
Why,
the banking thing.
Yeah, why not Wall Street?
So, not to get like overly gushy or spiritual, but it had something to do with that.
Sure.
My wife and I, we got married pretty young. I was 22, just
Okay.
barely. My wife was 21. We got excited about having kids, man. So
Sure.
we had our first one on the way, and he was a month. I graduated December 2007.
Uh-huh.
My son was born January 20th. And so as I was leading up to that, my wife's expecting a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and the closer and closer it got, the more and more terrified she was about,
Yeah.
okay, because I told her, like, on my mission, like, a hole in the wall costs like $2,500
Yeah.
a month, you know? And I'm like, so we're gonna go live in like worse than a hole in the wall, and I promise it's gonna be awesome. And I talked to my brother who had classmates, you know, in business school that did the banking thing, and they're like, you hear these horror stories of like sleeping under your cube and it's miserable and you do these all-nighters, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure, whatever. And I talked to him and like, no, like it really is that way. So I decided, and I thankfully told my wife. Like at the time, I'm like, I shouldn't have told her.
Yeah.
But I told my wife, and she's, you know, thinking this is not what I'm really interested in doing. I don't want to go be a single mom, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I also think it would be cool if my son knew who dad was before he turned 3 years old, right? And so I decided to shift gears, and I ended up interviewing at another place here in Utah. Financial analyst role, to go do that and use my finance degree, and got a great offer there. Accepted the offer. This was a like pretty big, you know, multi-billion-dollar public company.
Cool.
And so I'm feeling pretty good about myself because the offer was like, it exceeded what my peers were getting. So I'm like, and it wasn't because I'm like some brilliant dude.
Sure.
I kind of got hooked up. So.
Okay.
Anyway, I go in and I take the offer, accept it, and I had two other things. I had two things total after I decided that banking's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna go either do this analyst thing, or I was gonna go like take a huge risk and work at a startup.
Okay.
And at the time there was this startup called Funding Universe, and I thought they had won these like top startup to watch type of things, and you know, not to be like harsh, but like you find out later that like those awards are kind of they're given out like pretty freely in some cases, you know, and not to say that they didn't deserve it.
Sure.
They were doing great things, but I thought as a like I had no idea, like I thought, dude, these guys are holy cow, like this thing's going to the moon, you know. And so I just didn't have any perspective. Anyway, I ended up talking to the CEO there, and literally like a day after I had accepted this like great offer, I got an offer from them like on the spot. They interviewed me the next day, but it wasn't, again, this is just, it's kind of how a startup is, early stage. You find someone, you're like, oh, this guy will work for nothing, okay, let's give him an offer, you know? And that's kind of how it was. So I took this job there with like, the guaranteed income was like literally half of what I was going to get offered. Went from like a great benefits package to no benefits at all. Matching 401k, that was pretty generous, to like no health benefits, no retirement, nothing. And for you know, any startup, you feel this way where you're like, I don't know if that's what I was supposed to do, you know? But like, it became like really apparent, like, man, that was like such an awesome education.
Sure.
And got to work with guys that are like just super cool, really good guys. And I can say like without a doubt that had I not gone and taken that job, there's no way I would have started my own business. That was like, that was like an essential step that had to be taken in order for that to happen. If I would have done the banking thing or the analyst thing, I'd be, you know, in a cube somewhere doing something, and maybe I would have loved that, right? But
Sure.
I can guarantee I wouldn't have loved it as much as what I've been doing, because it's been an awesome ride.
So up to that point, did you ever think that you'd be entrepreneurial, or that you would, you know, have you felt the itch to try something? Did you have ideas during college?
My whole life, I've like been kind of like a scroungy dude that way. So
Okay.
like, I think my first like more, well, no, there are other things, but like as a kid, I would I'd try and sell things to my neighbors and stuff like that. But like when I was a senior in high school, we wanted to go do something cool for prom, but like cool meant like way outside the budget, you know.
Okay.
And so we had a garage sale to like raise enough funds to go do something awesome. I had a job as a lot boy at University Hyundai back in the day in Orem.
Yeah.
Me and my best friend, and it was a dry winter, and so we didn't have any cars to clean because they weren't getting dirty. And so we told all of our friends, just come over, bring your car, your parents' car, we'll detail them for $20, you know, because they had all this like nice stuff, right, to detail with me. You could do it really quick. We didn't ask for permission, so I got fired for doing that. But we made a lot of money for like a couple weeks. I did like window washing. I did like lawn mowing. In fact, window washing is what helped me pay for an engagement ring. And so yeah, I grew up playing soccer, like I said before. I thought that one day I'd like have this like online and retail soccer shop. And so it might come from like my dad running his own business. I don't really know, but I was pretty certain that one day I wanted to do my own thing. So I just didn't know when or what it would be really.
Okay. So now lead us up to, you know, the background behind GroSocial, sort of what the idea of GroSocial was, and maybe through some the defining challenges that you had to overcome through that process.
Yeah. So GroSocial is a kind of crazy thing. We started out not trying to create a social media marketing business like at all. Back when we started, this was like 2010. There's this company called myfamily.com, which a lot of you probably heard of. They had this Facebook app called We're Related that was like killing it. They had so many users, and I think it was like 65 million monthly active users, and it was a way to like build a family tree on Facebook, and it just went like kind of crazy viral. And we're looking at this and we're like, I want one of those, you know, that'd be pretty cool. And I knew that we had a connection into one of the engineers there, and had gotten some insight into like what the ad revenue was looking like, and it was pretty interesting. And so I thought, I wonder if we could do that, like instead of building a family tree, again, coming back to this sports thing, we could do it like with your soccer team or your football team or your baseball team, and maybe it could do this and that. And then it kind of like evolved into this never-ending like big mess of a product that we wanted to create. And me and a buddy from high school, I had gotten this like kind of irrational confidence working at Funding Universe, talking to businesses that were coming in trying to get money. And I'd think, God, that guy's, because I'd like interview the CEO and see if it felt legit before we'd like pass it along to a fundraising source. And you talk to some of these guys, and we'd ask them for their financials and stuff and see how they're performing, and you look at it and think, God, dude, they're like doing pretty good, and that guy's like not that sharp, you know? And so you think like, I can do this, you know? I could totally nail it. And so we kind of like, I had lunch with some buddies from high school, just kind of like one of those random things you do with your friends, and I kind of had that sort of conversation with everybody, like, dude, I promise we could do this. Like, we should totally do this. How fun would that be if like a bunch of our friends are all working together? And everyone's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then at the end, it was me and one guy,
Yeah.
one of my buddies, where we're like, we were actually serious about it.
Uh-huh.
So we set out to create this Facebook app back when there was like no mobile app.
Mhm.
You know, this is ancient, like 5 years ago, so long ago. But anyway, so we're thinking about building this app, and we you know, I'm like fresh out of school. My buddy's only, you know, a year further out of school than I am.
Uh-huh.
And we start building this thing by paying engineers because neither of us can code. And we're like using credit cards and maxing everything out, putting everything on the line while we have our day jobs elsewhere.
Okay.
And we get to the point where the product's kind of there, it's like ready to release. And then we're both kind of like, okay, like now what, you know?
Uh-huh.
And we didn't have any money. We'd spent we didn't have money in the first place. We were using borrowed money on our credit cards. So all that was maxed out. So it's like, all right, let's go, I don't know. I guess we need to go make more money somewhere else so that we can market this thing. And in the process of building this Facebook app, we learned a thing or two about social media and Facebook in general, and like, what are the things you should keep in mind if you want something to go viral on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, you know, within about a year or so of that, like preceding all of this, that this whole like getting lots of fans on a Facebook page started to become like a popular thing with big enterprises. And so we thought, dude, we could do that for the small business, right? No one's serving them. And so we thought, because we had day jobs, we would go to like car dealers and people that worked on Saturday and holidays and weekends and stuff like that and nights. And so we got a handful of customers, enough to like be making like 10 or 12 grand a month. And we would spend like 13 keeping them happy. And so, yeah, but we got to the point where we're like, the whole idea was, let's take this money and we'll market this cool app we made. And then we realized, people will pay us to do this. Like, let's just scrap that thing and let's do this.
That's cool.
And so that's kind of how GroSocial started. Like, the name was, I kind of had this idea, like, let's do that to pay for this other app. And I did it. I went to GoDaddy, and the first term I searched was GroSocial with a W, and it was taken, so we just shaved the W off. All good. So. And it was like a year after we were acquired that we bought GroSocial with a W from whoever owned it. So. Anyway, so we kind of went with that, and then we got to a point where we're like, you know, we had gotten different, because we couldn't go out and we couldn't like get on the phone and like dial for dollars or anything like that, because we had day jobs and we couldn't pay the bills doing that. And so what we decided is we would have lunch meetings with different businesses that served like small businesses in larger volume than we ever would, and see if they would white label our service. So we were like these service providers, and we talked to different businesses here in the area into like basically selling social media marketing services. And we had three things. We would do custom design on your Facebook page, like a new profile image, and we would also code up custom every time a basic app, which is like a tab is what they were called back then, where you could like run a promo. And then we had our social media boot camp, which was like a webinar series that I would do. And like, if I wasn't gonna make it home from work in time, I would do it in the parking lot from like the wireless signal at work, like on my, like, you know, like right after work was done, because it started at 6, because that's when work was over for me. I'd do them from the bathroom at my house, you know, because my kids were too loud. And so like, you know, you get questions like, what's with the echo? I'm like, oh, it must be on your end, you know. So, but we did that. We got to a point where we had like this good volume of customers, and we're like, dude, we could do really well if we just made this product.
How many employees are you at this point?
It's still just me and
my
co-founder. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, we're just kind of doing this. He would manage all the communication with like designers that we would outsource everything to, and these developers we would use, and I would do kind of like the consulting side of it, because I'd been doing a lot of that with my day job, you know. And so it was a little bit like more of a fit, and we divvied up the work that way. And we got to this point where like, dude, if we productized this and made it like a software platform where someone could build their own campaign and their own promotion on Facebook, and like we just kind of built these templated designs, I bet we could do pretty well, you know? And we said, we already got these partners and they would love it if they could just, instead of paying us $200, pay us like 10, you know, or 12. And so that's kind of like what we did. So we started recruiting, trying to find a CTO, which two schmucks with like no like legit background at all, it's pretty hard. And we just got lucky that I had an old friend from a neighborhood I used to live in, and he had a neighbor of his that had moved in after I left that area, was looking to leave the corporate grind and you know, quit working for the man. And so he connected us, and it took us about a week to decide that he should be our CTO and help take us to the promised land, and that's kind of how it all happened. So
that's sweet. So what would you say your hardest like hurdle that you overcame?
Honestly, like just survival, like daily survival. There were times where like you're like legitimately worried, like if you're gonna make it to tomorrow. You know, you look at the bank and you're like, it's not gonna cut it, you know, and you're realizing what that means to you personally, and how much that stresses out your spouse, and if your spouse is stressed, then you're stressed. And I mean, thankfully my wife's just awesome, you know, she couldn't have been like more supportive, and she just knew it would work out. But I mean, there are times where there's this one time in particular where this was like, I want to say like November or December of the year that we started it. I had left my job, and like we kind of jumped off the cliff, and we're working in our CTO's basement, and I'm on a sales call. We're all three of us in a spare bedroom in his house, and so it's like when I'm on a call, everyone just be quiet. You know? And my wife's calling me on the other line like over and over and over again, and I'm just thinking like, she doesn't do that unless it's kind of an emergency, right? So I asked the person I'm on the sales call with, like, sorry, it looks like I need to get this real quick, let me put you on hold. My wife's like at the checkout counter at Walmart, like the card's declining, you know? And I'm thinking like, oh no, like I'm that guy, you know? Like I totally botched, I'm just a horrible husband, just feeling terrible. I pull up our credit card statement, and I'm like, yeah, like there is no more. Like you have to like go do the walk of shame and go put stuff back on the shelves or whatever. Here's what's left, like kind of like not even half of what she needed. And that was like a super, like I would say at least like my co-founder had to leave his house. You know, there was some, I think, just surviving through those like really challenging times and saying like, look, we're gonna plow through it, we're gonna make it work. So it's not necessarily one hurdle, it's like a series of hurdles under the same category, I guess.
So was it just the fear of becoming that guy that, you know, kept pushing you forward? Like at what point is it still worth it to give up your home and, you know, readjust your entire lifestyle for this?
Yeah, so like full disclosure, like I don't advise doing that. So it's not a great way to live. Like, it ended okay for us, right? It ended pretty good. There's a happy ending, but it was kind of miserable for a while, you know. I think, I mean, for whatever reason, I just felt like this is gonna work, you know. And I don't know if that has to do with like me being a pretty competitive guy. Like I always say this: if I'm gonna go like play pickup basketball, I'm not that competitive because I know I'm not that good, you know. If I'm gonna play 10 years ago soccer, I'm gonna be really competitive because that's like my thing, you know. If I'm gonna be doing business and I'm gonna like put my name behind it, like it's gonna work out for people, you know. I kind of just have that. I have that sense of I'm not going to be the guy that lost someone money. I'm not going to be the guy. I felt this huge amount of, you could probably just call it pride, I guess, but feeling like I've got two sons and they're going to look up to me, and I hope they look up to me for good reasons and not the example of what not to do.
Yep.
And just thinking, you know, I'm not like Jesse and Owen's dad is like going to be a winner, you know. And to me, like, winner doesn't mean like a certain number in a bank account. It just means that like things were good, things worked out. You know, Dad worked hard and things were okay all the time. You know, and so that's kind of that was like a huge. It still is today, like a huge motivator for me.
So can you walk us through the moments of when you knew that you were going to have a successful exit? What was that like for you as an entrepreneur? What were your feelings?
I don't know. I mean, like when we found out that, I mean, we had this point about, I don't know, 5 or so months before we sold, where we decided, like, we had a board meeting. It was this, you know, we're going to do this. It feels like the time is right. There were 5 different companies in our industry that got acquired all within like 6 weeks of one another. And so it's kind of was this like signaling of there's some sort of consolidation going on. None of them were really direct competitors to us because we serve small businesses. They serve these like larger enterprises, and so, but they were all being bought except for one by like these CRM and marketing automation providers. A couple of which we had as partners that resold our software for us. And so we had this like built-in thing where we could, you know, we could go to these people and say, hey, like, I don't know if you're interested, but, you know, the board was our scapegoat, you know, board's orders, we gotta, you know, see if there's something here. And as we kind of dangled it out there, people were like surprisingly really, really interested. So we had a lot of different businesses that kind of all came to the table. And I mean, you start to get excited, and then you're like, I don't know if I even want to sell. Like, this is fun. Like, I'd like to keep doing this. This is. Is
there an emotional connection to like your baby and being grown?
Totally. You know, like everything that was good about my career was wrapped up in this brand. You know, and so like my professional identity was wholly tied to it. You know? And so. And because it was going well, I wasn't thinking like, yeah, let's get out of this thing, you know. But once we found out like, you know, these numbers were kind of interesting and whatnot, we decided to keep pushing forward. But yeah, when it like became like this reality of like, yeah, it looks like this is gonna happen. I think one thing, I don't know, it's cool to get that like outcome, right? But I don't know, I tried from the beginning to not really let that be anything that like truly mattered. You know, it matters in the sense that like, okay, this is great. I was able to help lead us to like this acquisition of our board. It was good for our investors. It was good for our team. But at the end of the day, like, you're still the same dude you were yesterday. So like, go back to work. You know, it doesn't really like mean all that much. You know. I think if you let it mean a ton, then that's probably a bad thing.
Sure.
So yeah.
So then, can you take us through? So I want to hear about HitLabs, and then I want to give these guys a chance to ask it some of their own questions. So, so tell us what you did once you weren't working anymore, and kind of what led to HitLabs and your first product.
Okay. So when I wrapped up, when we got acquired, we were acquired by a company called Infusionsoft, and they asked that I stay on for a couple of years. And so when that time had come to an end, I'd been feeling like it was time for me to go do something different. And so this was like Halloween time. In fact, Halloween was my last day there. And I thought, all right, I'm going to take a little bit of time to like recharge, catch my breath. It's been like a really crazy 4 years. And so Halloween was a Friday. I thought I'll kind of like take the rest of the year off. And I had the year before decided that skiing is something I should do. So I started skiing the year before, and I thought, oh, this will be fun. I'll take a lot of time and ski a bunch with the kids and stuff like that. Didn't snow that much. But I also had these like things on my list to do. Like I'm gonna, like I have this like massive photo library that my wife and I have accumulated. I'll get all those organized. That'll take forever. I'll clean out our basement because it's a nightmare. I got around to that yesterday, by the way.
Sweet.
But I started doing that for like cleaning out the basement literally like the following Monday, and did that for a couple hours, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is so stupid. Like, I'm gonna really do this sort of stuff for like 2 months, you know? And so I lasted like until Wednesday, and I said, I just need to go do something. I need to go start something. And so I had been talking to people, you know, like, hey, it would be fun if we did something, because I had, you know, I've got these non-solicitations and things like that. So there are certain people I couldn't talk to out of respect to my former employer. So decided, hey, like, let's talk to some of these guys and say, like, do you have an appetite to like go hard and go do something? And sure enough, there were a total of 6 of us that kind of assembled together and started working on a new thing. So yeah.
And so, so what is it?
So
tell us about it.
So the entity is called HitLabs. It originally was meant to be kind of like a startup studio, I guess you could call it. You know, we weren't certain exactly what we wanted to build. We just knew we had some pretty exciting ideas.
So just so you know, that domain's already taken. So
yeah, by us. Anyway. So anyway, we had this great idea, or I should say, we felt like we had these like 10 great ideas, right? And we knew we're self-aware enough to know that like, if we think we have 10 good ones, we probably really only have 1 good one, and 9 of them probably stink, and we don't know which 9 stink and which one's awesome. And so we decided, let's start with the one that we can validate or invalidate fast, and that way we can still survive and get, you know, another 2 or 3 swings in before we have to die a horrible death, you know. And so we also, coincidentally, the one that we felt like we could validate or invalidate fast enough felt like the biggest opportunity if it did go well. And so we started in January, kind of working, actually like writing code. Yeah. And we were working on an app that it's like first iteration is it takes the photos and eventually videos that you have on your smartphone or stored in the cloud, regardless of which cloud provider you use. Yeah. And it applies a bunch of tags like metadata to each photo to make it more searchable. So that was kind of like the first version of it. Second version, which is kind of like what we've decided to launch with, layers in a kind of storytelling component to it. We take photos because we want to remember something. Let's see if we can mesh like the concept of photos in a journal into a single app. And so in a way you could think of it as like your own personal privatized Instagram in a way. And that's kind of what we're plowing forward with. So yeah, we launched it last week. In a real big rush, and so if you install it today and you're an iCloud user, as you've learned, it's not the greatest experience.
Not the worst.
It's kind of bad. But if you aren't an iCloud user, it's pretty cool. The first version of it's pretty cool, and in about 10 days, it's going to get like really, really cool, and in about 2 months, it's going to be like a really legitimately awesome app. So we're pretty thrilled about it.
And so I saw Mashable had some good things to say about it, right? Number 2 for kind of organize your photos. Yeah. Right behind Behemoth. Yeah. You know, the whale that starts swimming in our waters called Google. So yeah. Well, that's awesome. It sounds like a huge opportunity. So let's give a big hand for Zach for Yes, we probably have time for 3 or 4 questions from the audience, if you guys have questions.
When you were in the process of courting acquirers, people that were going to like Infusionsoft, how did you how did you go about that? I mean, I know you had built-in relationships with a couple of them, but like if you were to recommend to us, like, you know, we have a company that could be a really good fit for a strategic acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Is it literally just cold calling, or how could someone, like, you know, get it into the senior level, the decision makers of these strategic acquirers from your perspective? How would you do that?
So for us, it worked out nice because we built our business on having this network of bigger businesses that resold our software in a white labeled fashion. So we had contracts with like 20, 30 different, like, pretty big businesses. And then a few of them had expressed interest, like, hey, if you guys interested in selling? And we always just kind of like deflected this, right? Because it's super early, we knew that if like selling would mean like not a good outcome for everybody because it's just too soon. And so when it came time for us, we didn't like necessarily say, okay, we have to sell this, you know? We looked at it and said, like the rumored multiple, like revenue multiples or valuations of the companies that were getting acquired were kind of like, yeah, they were irrational in the favor of the startup, right? And so we thought, let's go see if there's anything there, because, you know, if you sell a business for the right price today, you take potentially years of risk off the table if the valuation's right, for the same outcome, you know? And so from an IRR standpoint, all those things, it turns into a pretty cool outcome. So what we had is we had these different businesses, and our approach was, hey, look, we have businesses that are interested because these businesses have expressed interest. Our board has instructed us to, because of the climate right now, entertain offers that may be out there. We've loved working with you. We realize that if we get acquired, that might mean something for you that, you know, you or we cannot control really, because we're going to be owned by another entity. So we wanted to give you an opportunity, if there's interest, to throw your hat in the ring. Know though that we're not for sale. We're not like itching to sell. We're just looking. We're seeing if this is something that we should in fact be looking at, and we feel like we owe you the respect to let you know and let you participate if it's something that you feel like you'd like to participate on. So that's how we approached it, and I mean we were shocked what the response was. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't advise cold calling, because it would definitely sound like super desperate, which is going to put you in a position where it's not going to work out to your favor at all.
What were some of the deciding factors when you eventually did sell? Was it all just like, oh, these guys are offering more of them, or there's more potential at this company to?
Yeah, so the company that acquired us, again, they're called Infusionsoft. They're headquartered in Arizona. We talked to a few different companies, like, really seriously, and obviously them most seriously. They were, the types of numbers that were kicked around, you know, some loosely, some really, like, seriously, we're all kind of in the same ballpark, you know? So to us, there were a few things that made Infusionsoft feel like a no-brainer. They provided a way for there to be some, like, significant upside, and that was like super meaningful because it wasn't insignificant. But even more so than that, like, they're like superb people. My whole like negotiating process with, especially when it reached working with their CEO, was like super impressive. I just was shocked by how great a guy he was. And you know, it's not common when you're like either in a fundraising scenario or in a you know, that heavy of a negotiation where you're selling your company, where you have somebody that's like, yeah, I can totally see that from where you're coming from. I understand. I think you're right. We should probably do it that way. Those aren't the types of responses you expect to hear from somebody who can dictate a lot because they've got the gold so they can make the rules. But I mean, that like true colors were shown like pretty early in the process, and they kept being so consistent, and I ended up just developing a ton of respect for them. And then it was also just this company that like was endlessly intriguing to me. You know, they were going places, and I kind of liked the idea that they were still a private company, and it just felt like the right stage of company for us to go be a part of as well. So there are a lot of different things. It was an emotional decision for sure, you know? Like there's this company that would have been like, go work for a dinosaur, and that felt like really depressing, you know? Like I knew that I would definitely rather just keep going at it than go work there. And Infusionsoft was like, no, this thing's like still cranking, you know? They'll probably go public in the near future. Like that's a cool thing to go live through. So there are a lot of things like that that like really called to me.
Maybe one more question? Or no more questions? Okay, let's give it up one more time for Zach.